Brash, immature, egotistical, selfish. These are the words I would use to describe the character of TommyInnit. Just to clarify, I am very much talking about the character in the DreamSMP, not the actual person. I'm sure he's a great guy and I don't wish to be crucified today, no thank you. But the character of TommyInnit, he rushes to decisions without contemplating consequences. He is hot-headed and lets emotion blind him at the worst of times. He is so incredibly full of himself that he cannot admit he was ever wrong. This is the majority of people's first impressions of TommyInnit. I mean, he even repeats the sentiment in his own intro. Most people find me annoying at first. Take the first day he enters the server. He immediately steals and becomes hostile and then throws a hissy fit when Dream quote-unquote exiles him. Looking back, the dramatic irony is immaculate. And looking at that now, you can see that seemingly nothing much has changed. He simply graduated from theft to arson. He seems like a very flat and one-dimensional static character if you look simply at his actions. So why is he regarded by so many as the protagonist of the DreamSMP? Before we get into it, I just want to say that if you enjoy the content and want to support the channel, then consider subscribing. It's free and helps a lot. You can always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. Thank you. I want to make it clear at this point that there is really no protagonist to the DreamSMP. As Wilbur describes it in a video I've linked in the description, the characters are not the story houses the characters. He goes on to say that you wouldn't have a character with its own episode in the DreamSMP. No one character directs the story, and that is very important. They are more naturally pushed around by the ebb and flow of the natural progression of events. It would be almost impossible to have a main character in a server where almost every character streams. Everyone's perspective is open and available to anyone who wants to watch. There is obviously, however, a clear villain in Dream, being one of the few who doesn't stream the SMP that's able to happen. He can have plots that no one knows about. His motivations and why he does the chaotic things he does are not always disclosed. The only other obvious villain was Schlatt. He also did not stream the server, which is why it worked for him as well. Because the DreamSMP has managed to be so story-based, whilst still retaining its Minecraft server attributes, clear roles cannot really be assigned to the majority of characters. Villains need to be somewhat one-dimensional to work as villains in fiction, which is why Technoblade or Wilbur being villains is so heavily debated. They have good parts as well as the homicidal rage. There is a lot of discourse about who the main character is, because so many people only watch one or two streamers regularly. So to them, it would naturally appear as though that streamer is the main character, as their actions are front and centre for much of that viewer's perception of the events on the server. But this argument of Tommy or Techno, or anyone else for that matter, being the main character, is inherently flawed because of how the characters are written around the story, and not the other way around. If you'd given me that paragraph about Tommy's character in the first month of him joining the DreamSMP, I would have wholeheartedly agreed with you in every aspect. He was a high-ego, low-self-esteem teenager who thought he owned the world. He was a complete dickhead for the sake of comedy. And don't get it twisted, I loved it, and so did tens of thousands of people clearly, but reading that analysis now, I can't help but think. Think about the time when Tommy was in possession of the discs that meant so much to him, but he gave them up for the freedom and independence of others. And the incident regarding the discs most recently, which I will touch upon later in more depth, he again gives up the discs for his friendships and his country. I think about these moments, and I think about Tommy in exile, alone and afraid and being manipulated by Dream. And suddenly his immaturity is recontextualized as naivety. Tommy is not just egotistical and selfish, or he would have pursued his own personal goals to the point of villainy, which we can see he actively hasn't done. He's chosen to not do that. Time and time again he proves that while he is an emotional being, that emotion is not only rage but compassion and genuine care for those around him. Yes, he is for the most part careless and quick to make important decisions, but keep in mind, he is a child who has been put through unearned trauma at age 16, fighting in a war and serving as the vice president to Wilbur. The vice president of an entire country at such a young age, before being betrayed by not only Wilbur, but Techno and Tubbo and everyone he knows. That's a lot of responsibility to put on a 16-year-old. I would argue that Tommy's character is very dynamic. He has developed and changed more than any other character in the server. Sure, he still retains attributes of how he was before the war and before his exile, but there are a few defining moments where we see Tommy look at himself, really look at himself, and see something he doesn't like. The first of these is at the climax of the L'Manberg DreamSMP war. A fight for freedom. I did mention this earlier, but I bring it up once more because of the absolute unexpected depth it brought to Tommy's character. Before, we had only one clear motivator for Tommy, his discs, and at this point he gives them up for the sake of others, basically confirming where his loyalty really lies. It lies not with some discs he found, but with his friends and his nation. But in order to understand the magnitude of these moments, I need to explain what the discs symbolize for Tommy. He explains in the video, So I Started a Minecraft War vs. Dream, that the discs took him hours to get, but the time commitment is not the real value of the discs for Tommy. After the disc war, him and Tubbo listened to Cat in celebration on the now infamous bench. The discs symbolize a time in Tommy and Tubbo's friendship where political relations did not interfere with their relationship. They symbolize a part of Tommy's life before all of the trauma that he has been through since. The sentimental value of the discs is much greater than whatever time commitment he may have originally cared about them for. Again, him and Tubbo listened to Cat before the election. At that time in their friendship and in Tommy's life, it was Tommy and Tubbo against the world. The quote, "Me and you, big man," comes to mind. So to Tommy, the discs are a symbol of friendship, of innocence and fun, not muddied by the annals of war. Tommy is constantly battling with the importance of the real relationships that the sentimental value of the discs is built on, and the discs themselves. Would he rather live with friendships that may be corrupted, that aren't perfect, or would he rather live with the items that bring up the memories of when those friendships were perfect? The second, and in my opinion most important time this happens, is where he gives up his discs during the second festival. Upon Tommy being accused of vandalism and griefing by Dream, Tubbo has to make the decision to give Dream the disc Tommy gave him. Tubbo was given this disc as a sign of trust, a sign that Tommy values their friendship more than the discs themselves. To contextualize what happens next, I'll explain that Tommy before this moment has been separated from Tubbo for a very long time. After his exile, he doesn't see Tubbo canonically, except in passing. That is why over the course of his exile he becomes obsessed, more than usual, with the discs. Also, seeing Wilbur descend into madness and realizing some friendships never recover from the scars of war, Tommy makes the decision that the discs are more important than his friendships. He doesn't care who he has to betray to get them, he wants to live in the memories of happier times as opposed to the reality of pain and suffering that surrounds him. I do not believe this is a conscious choice made by Tommy. His character just falls down this rabbit hole of despair, starting with the festival, Techno's betrayal and Wilbur's madness, and bookending nicely at the next festival, with Tubbo's betrayal, his choice to give the disc to Dream. The only way for Tommy to break free of the spell the discs have put him under is if he looks at himself, if he really looks at who he has become and how his values have shifted. He yells in the midst of a fight with Tubbo, "The discs were worth more than you ever were." This is a turning point for Tommy's character. He hears himself and realizes what he has become, that it was not just Dream separating their friendship as he has stated in the past, that it was partially him pushing Tubbo away this whole time in favour of the discs. What this means for Tommy's character and how he has developed is that when he makes the call to give Dream the discs, even if it means he may never get them back, he's moving on. His values are changing, and he is becoming more invested in his real friendships than the fake memories the discs would bring him. For the first time, since they parted on that bench before the election. They stand side by side, Tommy and Tubbo against the world once more. So Tommy's character may be brash, he may be naive, but he is no longer selfish. His character is dynamic in the way it responds to trauma, first by building icy walls to protect him from the reality he lives in and trapping him with the memories before the wars, but then his personality shines through. It may be what got him in this position in the first place, but his hot-headedness and tendency to speak his mind is what makes him realise his mind isn't what he wants it to be. He doesn't want to value his friends less than the discs. Yes, he can be annoying, but he's just a kid in the end. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this offers you a new perspective on Tommy's character, even if it's entirely off what Wilbur and Tommy envisioned. This was still a lot of fun to create. If you enjoyed the content, then consider subscribing. I put a lot of work into these videos and I would very much appreciate it. It's entirely free and you can always unsubscribe later. Thank you.